Noon in the old quarter of a Gulf port town, late July. You're standing in an alley 2 meters wide, and the air is 47 degrees Celsius, 117 Fahrenheit. There is no wind. The sky is not blue, but white, bleached out by a sun that sits almost directly overhead, and the light comes at you twice, once from above, once reflected off walls the color of bone. You reach out and touch one of those walls. You pull your hand back. Surfaces standing in open sun here can climb past 70 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cook the skin of your palm if you held it there. The ground radiates heat upward through the soles of your shoes. Your body is losing water faster than you can feel it leaving, because in air this dry, sweat vanishes the instant it forms. You never feel wet. You simply feel weaker, hour by hour. In heat like this, an unprotected human being is in real danger within hours. Not discomfort, danger. The body's cooling system runs on evaporation and shade, and out here you have neither. No shade, no water, no wall between you and the sky that isn't itself burning. And yet, people lived here. Not survived, lived. Raised children, wove cloth, traded pearls and dates, grew old. In this alley, in this heat, for centuries before the first air conditioner hummed to life anywhere on Earth. Ahead of you is a low wooden door, dark teak studded with iron. It belongs to a courtyard house, the same design merchants and pearl divers built along this coast for generations. Step through it. The heat falls away. Not a little, not politely. It drops like a stone. The air inside the shaded passage is cool enough that your skin registers the change as something close to cold. Somewhere ahead, in the bright square of the courtyard, you can hear water. The stone floor under your feet holds the temperature of a cellar. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the shadow, and in that moment, your body understands what your mind has not yet caught up to. This building is doing something. No machine, no power line, no compressor, no refrigerant, no moving part anywhere in the structure. Just coral stone, gypsum, teak, and air, arranged by people who never saw an equation written down into a system that modern engineers study with instruments and still admire. The question isn't whether it worked. Thousands of summers say it worked. The question is how. And the answer begins with the one weapon the desert hands to anyone patient enough to notice it. The weapon is time. Specifically, the gap between what the desert does at noon and what it does at 3 in the morning. Stand on the sand 100 kilometers inland from that alley and measure the air across a single day in July. At mid-afternoon, it may read 45 degrees. Before dawn, it can fall below 30. On some nights, into the mid-20s. That fall is not a mercy of climate. It is physics. Dry air holds almost no moisture. And moisture is what traps heat near the ground after sunset. Humid places smother under a wet blanket all night. The desert has no blanket. When the sun leaves, the day's heat pours upward into a cloudless sky, radiating out toward space, and the temperature drops 15 degrees, sometimes 20 in a matter of hours. Engineers call this the diurnal swing, the daily round trip between extremes. To anyone trying to stay alive here, the swing is the entire game. The desert is not one climate. It is 2 climates on a 24-hour rotation, a furnace and a cool, dry night that would feel almost gentle anywhere else. The furnace you cannot fight, the night you can store. Now look at what the furnace actually delivers. At midday on a clear summer day, the sun pours roughly a kilowatt of energy onto every square meter it touches. About the output of a household space heater running flat out on every meter of roof and wall facing the sky. A modest flat roof of 100 square meters is absorbing energy on the scale of 100 space heaters at full power, hour after hour for most of the day. That is the heat problem stated in numbers. No shutter, no curtain, no habit of moving slowly in the afternoon touches a load like that. So the builders of the Gulf and the deserts behind it asked a different question. Not, how do we make cold? They had no means to make cold. The question was, how do we make the night last until the next night arrives? The answer rests on two principles, and it is worth naming them because the entire house you just walked into is built from nothing else. The first is thermal mass, the capacity of heavy material to soak up heat the way a sponge soaks up water. Stone, earth, thick plaster, they do not block heat so much as swallow it, degree by degree, holding enormous amounts of energy before their inner surface warms at all. The second is thermal lag, the time that heat needs to soak through that mass. Make a wall thick enough and dense enough, and the noon heat crawling through it does not reach the inside for 8, 10, 12 hours. By the time yesterday's furnace finally arrives at the inner face of the wall, it is the middle of the night, and the cool air outside is already draining the wall from both sides, resetting it for morning. A thin wall transmits the day. A massive wall postpones it until the day no longer exists. That is the trap the desert builders set for the sun. They made it always arrive too late. The next question is what they built the trap out of. And on this coast, the answer came out of the sea. Walk back to that bone-white wall you burned your hand on. Look at what it's made of. Along the Gulf Coast, the building stone did not come from a quarry. It came out of the shallows at low tide. Slabs of fossilized coral and compacted beach rock, pried loose from the seabed, the pearling crews knew better than their own streets. Builders called the flat reef slabs farouche. Stacked and mortared, they made a wall unlike anything cut from a mountain. Coral is riddled with pores, thousands of tiny dead chambers in every block, each one a pocket of trapped air. That structure matters. Solid, dense rock conducts heat steadily inward. Coral does something better. It combines real mass with all that captive air, and still air is one of the finest insulators there is. A coral wall both swallows heat and slows it down, two defenses in a single material. Over the rough coral went gypsum plaster, burned from the same coastal rock in simple kilns, crushed, slaked, and troweled on in white coats. The gypsum sealed the wall against the humid sea air and gave the town its blinding color. And the color itself was a weapon. White reflects most of the sunlight that strikes it, turning away a large share of that kilowatt per square meter assault before it ever enters the stone. The wall hurt your hand at noon. A dark wall would have hurt it far more. Then there is the dimension you can't see from the alley: thickness. These walls run 40 to 60 centimeters deep, knee to hip on a grown man. Remember thermal lag. At that thickness, in that material, the noon heat needs most of a day to crawl through. The inner face of the wall releases yesterday's warmth into the small hours of the night, when the courtyard is already flooded with cool air to carry it away. The wall never delivers its heat on time. That is its entire job. Now look up and count the windows. There are almost none, and the few that exist sit high and small, punched near the ceiling. This is the second rule of desert walls. Every opening is a wound. Glass and open sills admit the sun's radiation directly, bypassing the mass entirely. So the builders kept openings scarce at street level, pushed them high where rising warm air could escape, and faced the real windows inward, toward the courtyard, the private shaded sky at the heart of the house. Where a large opening was wanted, for light, for a breeze, for a woman to watch the street unseen, it was filled not with glass, but with a screen. Mashrabiyah, teak lattice, carved into a mesh of small apertures. The geometry is exact in its effect. Each little opening breaks the incoming light into a soft glow, kills the direct beam of the sun, and squeezes passing air through narrow gaps. And air forced through a constriction speeds up, so the screen turns a faint breeze into something you can feel on the skin. Shade, privacy, and wind, cut from one panel of wood. Ceilings ran high, often 4 meters and more, so the warmest air in a room could float up and away from the people in it. Roofs were built of chandal, mangrove poles shipped across the ocean from East Africa, layered with woven mats and packed earth. More mass, more lag, overhead where the sun's attack is fiercest. Mass, whiteness, thickness, scarce openings, carved screens, high ceilings. Every choice pointing at the same enemy, and every choice passive. No fuel, no maintenance beyond a fresh coat of juice. The walls bought 12 hours. They didn't solve the air. A sealed stone box, however cool at dawn, fills with the breath and heat of the people inside it by afternoon. The house needed lungs. And that is where the real genius begins. Stand in the courtyard at 3 in the morning, and you can watch the house breathe in. All night, the walls and the packed earth roof have been shedding the day's heat into a black, cloudless sky. The air they cool grows heavier, cold air always does, and it sinks. It slides down the inner walls and pools in the courtyard like water filling a well. By the last hours of the night, the heart of the house holds a reservoir of the coolest air in the neighborhood, several degrees below the alley outside, trapped by the very walls that made it. The builders had turned the courtyard's shape into a vessel. An open square in the middle of a house is not a garden that happens to be enclosed. It is a tank for storing the night. Then the sun rises and the machine reverses. The high walls throw the courtyard floor into shade for most of the morning. The cool reservoir sits protected while the alleys outside begin to bake. As the day climbs, sun finally strikes the upper walls and the air there warms, loosens, and rises. And that is the trigger. Rising air must be replaced. The warm column drifting up and out of the courtyard pulls the dense, cool air through the doorways of the rooms around it. A slow, silent circulation that draws the stored night through the house exactly when the people inside need it most. Engineers call the principle the stack effect. Warm air rises, cool air flows in beneath to take its place. Every chimney on earth runs on it. The courtyard house is a chimney turned inside out. Built not to exhaust smoke, but to keep a slow current of the coolest available air moving across human skin. And moving air is the point. Even air at body temperature strips heat from a person by carrying sweat away as vapor. Still, heat kills. Moving heat is merely brutal. But the coast offered a second force, and the builders refused to waste it. For much of the summer, a reliable wind blows off the Gulf. The problem was reaching it. Down in a 2-meter alley between packed houses, the wind never arrives. The wind lives above the rooftops, so they went up and caught it. Rising from the roofline of the finest rooms stands a square tower several meters tall, its head open on all 4 sides, each opening divided by diagonal partitions that meet in the center like an X. The Gulf builders called it the Barjeel, the wind tower, cousin to the Persian Badgir across the water. It is the skyline of every old quarter from Dubai to Bastak. And it is not decoration. It is a valve. The geometry does 2 jobs at once. Whichever direction the wind blows, one face of the tower catches it, and the internal partitions channel it down the shaft. Pressurized, forced below the roofline into the room at the tower's base, washing over the people sitting there. Meanwhile, the leeward faces, where the wind rushes past the openings, do the opposite. Moving air across an opening lowers the pressure behind it and sucks air up and out. One tower, no moving parts, inhaling on one side and exhaling on the other in the same moment from any wind on the compass. And on the still days, the worst days, when the sea breeze dies and the heat stands on the town like a weight, the tower keeps working anyway. Its masonry shaft, thick and shaded, stays cooler than the sun-struck air above the roof. Air inside the shaft cools against the stone, grows dense, and slides down of its own weight, while the warm exhaust rises out the far side. The wind tower becomes a stack again, running on nothing but temperature and gravity. Why build a tower with no floors, open to the sky? Because it is a lung. Courtyard below. Tower above, one machine breathing in 2 rhythms. The daily rhythm of the stored night, the momentary rhythm of the sea wind, with no fuel and nothing to break. That cooled the air. It still didn't solve the water. A human being in this climate needs several liters of water a day simply to stay upright. The house could store the night and catch the wind, but water it had to keep, through months without a drop of rain, in air that steals moisture from anything that holds it. Start with where the water came from. The coastal towns drew from wells sunk to the brackish lens beneath the sand, and from sweetwater springs the pearling crews knew even on the seabed itself, divers filled skins from freshwater vents bubbling up through the Gulf floor. Inland oases lifted their water from the Falah, the channel system's cousin to Persia's qanats, running for kilometers underground where the sun could not tax them. However it arrived, water in this world was labor, and nothing about its storage was casual. And here the builders did something that looks, at first glance, like a mistake. They stored drinking water in porous jars. A sealed vessel would seem the obvious choice, nothing lost. Instead, in a shaded corner of the courtyard or in the path of the Barjeel's downdraft, stood the hib, a tall, unglazed clay jar, its walls deliberately permeable. Water seeps slowly through the clay and films the outer surface, and there the desert's own hunger is turned against it. Dry air devours moisture, but evaporation has a price, and the air pays it in heat. Every gram of water that vanishes off the jar's skin carries away energy, pulled straight from the water remaining inside. The physics is the same engine as human sweat. The jar perspires and its contents chill. The numbers are worth pausing on. In hot, dry, moving air, an unglazed jar can hold its water 5 to 10 degrees below the temperature of the room around it. No ice, no cellar, nothing but clay and wind. Families set a small bowl beneath the jar to catch the seepage, stood it where the tower's breeze washed over it, and drew water that met the lips cool at the bottom of a 47-degree afternoon. A sealed jar keeps every drop and serves it warm. The porous jar spends a little water to make the rest worth drinking. That trade, a controlled loss for a vital gain, is desert engineering in a single object. The same engine was scaled up to cool people. A wetted cloth or a bundle of damp matting hung in the throat of the wind tower turned the whole shaft into what engineers now call an evaporative cooler. Air forced down over the wet surface sheds several degrees before it ever reaches the room, arriving not just moving but genuinely cooler, and slightly humidified, a mercy for throats and eyes cracked by months of dry wind. The households of the Gulf were running direct evaporative cooling centuries before the technique had a name, using the tower they already had and a bucket of well water. Deeper still, the coolest place in many houses was wherever the water lived. Storage rooms and cisterns sat low, half-sunk, thick-walled, shaded from every angle. Because the same mass that guarded people guarded the supply. The ground itself, a few meters down, holds steady in the mid-20s year-round, while the surface above swings through its daily violence. Builders coupled their water to that constancy and let the earth do the guarding. Notice what has happened. Air, stone, and water are no longer separate problems. The tower cools the jar. The jar cools the drinker. The water wets the cloth that cools the air. The earth steadies the water. The house is not a shelter with features. It is a single circuit. And its finest trick is that it never asks the family to stand still inside it. It asks them to move. The family that owned this house did not live in it the way a modern family lives in a cooled apartment, settled in one room, one climate, one temperature all year. They lived in it the way sailors live on a ship, moving with the weather, hour by hour, deck by deck. Follow them through one summer day. The blazing afternoon belongs to the ground floor, the deep rooms behind the thickest walls, where the morning's stored coolness lasts longest and the Barjeel's breath arrives at its freshest. As evening comes and the alleys exhale, life climbs to the courtyard. Cooking, talk, coffee, the day's business finished in the open tank of shade. And at night the family climbs again, to the place a visitor least expects, the roof. The roof, the furnace lit of noon, becomes the coolest bedroom in the house after dark. The reason is the third great engine of desert physics, radiative cooling. A body under a clear, dry night sky does not merely cool into the air around it. It beams its heat outward through the transparent atmosphere toward the cold of space itself. And the desert sky, cloudless and moistureless, is one of the most open windows to space on Earth. A sleeper on a rooftop mat sheds heat to the stars directly. Families slept there most of the summer, behind the parapet, in a breeze the alley never felt, and came down at dawn as the sun retook the high ground. The seasons ran the same migration in slow motion. Many houses kept summer rooms and winter rooms, the tower room for the hot months, and for the brief sharp winter, rooms on the sunlit side with low openings that welcomed the same sun the summer plan spent all its effort refusing. The house did not have one answer, it had a schedule. None of this assembled itself. Behind every courtyard house stood the ustad, the master builder, carrying the whole system in his head. No drawings, no calculations on paper. The proportions of tower and courtyard and wall passed from master to apprentice as craft. Below him worked the men who pried Farouche slabs off the tidal flats, burned and slaked the gypsum, unloaded mangrove poles from ocean dows. The money came from pearls. The finest houses of the coast were built on the backs of divers. A large merchant house could consume years of skilled labor. Cooling was not free. It was simply paid for once, in stone and sweat, instead of forever in fuel. One more piece of desert wisdom deserves its moment because it is so often told wrong. Travelers seeing the region's people robed in the Bedouin tent woven black have long repeated the myth that dark colors somehow cool, that the desert defies the physics of white walls. The data tells a different story. The black goat hair tent runs hot on its outer surface, yes, and that very heat drives air up and out through the loose weave, pulling a draft through the deep shade beneath, while the coarse cloth blocks the sun's radiation almost completely. Loose, dark, ventilated layers cool the same way. It is the shade and the moving air that save the body, not the color. The principle is the courtyard house's principle, folded into cloth. Never fight the heat head-on. Redirect it and make it work the exit. A machine of stone, wind, water, and habit. But to the people inside it, it was never only a machine. Ask why the courtyard sits at the center of the house, and physics gives only half the answer. The other half is written in what the family did there. The courtyard was the house's private sky, the one place a household could stand in open air unseen by any stranger, in a culture where the home's interior was inviolable. Walls that read as fortress from the alley enclosed a world of its own within. A square of light, a tree, the water jar, the sound of the well. Islamic tradition carried the image further. Paradise itself is described as a garden with water flowing beneath it, and the courtyard with its shaded basin was that promise made small and daily. Enclosed water was not merely stored, it was honored. The fountain at the center of a great house was the same object as the hib in a poor one, the household's life, held in the coolest, most protected point of its world. And the guest was received at that center. Coffee poured in the tower room, the coolest seat given away first. Hospitality in a lethal climate is not etiquette. It began as survival, extended to the stranger, and hardened over centuries into honor. Now widen the view, because the Gulf builders were not alone, and never knew it. On the Iranian plateau, the Barjeel towers of Yazd breathed over sunken courtyards and ice houses. In the Saharan south of Tunisia, at Matmata, Berber families dug their courtyards straight down into the earth and lived in the pit's cool shade. In Rajasthan, builders sank stepwells 100 feet to reach water and cool air in the same descent, and screened their palaces in stone jali lattice, the Mashrabiya's twin, carved by hands that had never seen the Gulf. Different continents, different faiths, different centuries. The same courtyard, the same mass, the same tower, the same sweating jar. When cultures that never met converge on one design, the design is not a custom. It is a solution. The shape the answer takes whenever human beings hold the same equation of sun, air, and water long enough. The desert posed one question everywhere it stretched. Everywhere, patients returned the same reply, which leaves only you, still standing where the day began, at the doorway between the two worlds. Come back at dusk. The alley where you stood at noon is unrecognizable. The white walls glow amber, the air is loosening its grip, and the ground gives back its heat to a sky already going violet. You stand at the same low teak door, and this time, you understand everything on the other side of it. You know the walls are still holding noon inside them and will not surrender it until you are asleep. You know the courtyard is beginning to fill, degree by degree, with the cool that will carry the family through tomorrow. You know the tower above the roofline is breathing without being told to, and the jar in its corner is sweating itself cold, and the roof is preparing to hand its sleepers to the stars. Nothing in the house has moved all day. Everything in the house has worked. Could you survive a 47-degree summer here? The honest answer is that you would do far more than survive. You would live on a schedule older than the house itself, the sun's schedule, read so closely for so many generations that stone and wind and water learned to run it without you. The people who built this house had no engines, so they built no enemies. They didn't fight the heat, they engineered around it. Across the water, on the Iranian plateau, another people faced the same sun with an even stranger answer. Towers that made ice in the open desert without electricity centuries before the freezer. That story is next. Stay in the shade. This is a historical documentary, not survival or building advice.